Welcome back to the Purple Political Breakdown. How's it going? How's your day been? We are back with another episode, and today is going to be more of a conversation. Today, I'm going to be talking with some members from Equal Vote Coalition, and more specifically, I'm going to talk about star voting, in particular, star voting as it happens in Ohio, which is a place I live. So, this is more going to be a local conversation. I've already had a big, more broad conversation regarding star voting in general. So this is going to be a lot more specific. So we'll dive into the nitty gritty. We'll dive into the details. We'll get some updates on how star voting is going. And overall, it should be a great conversation. If you guys enjoy, make sure you guys rate the podcast 5 stars. And if you want to contact me, feel free to go to my website, www.purplepoliticalbreakdown.com. Now, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Duncan.
Hello, thank you, Riddell. My name is Duncan Sior. I am the Vice President of Star Voting Action, Chairman of Star Voting Ohio, and a member of the board of Equal Vote Coalition. And I live in Columbus, Ohio.
Hi, I'm Kyle Campbell. I'm also a resident of Columbus, Ohio, and I'm the secretary, part of the Columbus, Ohio branch.
All right, excellent. I tell people all the time that I'm a big advocate for like political solutions. My motto is political solutions without political bias. It doesn't really matter what side you're on, as long as we can come to some type of compromise. And after like going through a lot of the topics I've been going through, voting reform and star voting in particular have definitely been a very interesting thing that I think should be talked about more. We definitely talked about it before we had Sarah on to talk about star voting in a very broad sense. I did my own research before she came on to talk about different types of voting strategies. But now, since I've talked to Sarah, which was a couple months ago, sometime maybe either earlier on this year or last year, I'm sure, things have changed. So I'm curious, like for you guys, what kind of things has, more specifically, the Equal Vote Coalition and Star Voting been working on since last time we spoke?
So thank you, Riddell. Right now, the absolute top priority is the upcoming Eugene election, which I think is in just what's today? 3 days. On Tuesday, May 21st, the city of Eugene will be voting on whether to use star voting for their mayor and city council elections. If it succeeds, Eugene will be the first city in the country in United States history to use star voting. So, as you can imagine, this is a pretty important occasion, and our board, our leaders are their focus. Whereas we are a national organization, their focus is very much on Eugene, rightfully so, I'd say. So that's the biggest update as of now. That nationally, or at least nationally, and especially in Eugene. Here in Ohio, we officially launched Star Voting Ohio back in January of this year. We had our first public meetup at the Columbus Metropolitan Library main branch. And ever since then, we've just hit the ground running with, just mostly informal grassroots advocacy, primarily via word of mouth through social media, hosting tabling events such as at Earth Day Columbus. And we have an upcoming tabling event at ComFest, which is ComFest is just short for Community Festival, I believe. It's a major one of the major festivals that happens in Columbus every summer. Some notable wins that we've had for Ohio. So at Capital University, one of the student organizations at Capital University Law School, it's called First Generation Law School Student Society. They ratified their charter to use star voting for their internal officer elections. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first organization in Ohio history to use star voting. And secondly, also related to Capital University, the student newspaper published a piece for star voting. A student journalist by the name of Samari Perkins published that. So that was pretty good.
All right, excellent. Obviously, I'm a resident of Ohio. If people who are listening did not know that, I definitely would be interested in going to one of those meetings, but Columbus is quite far away from where I live, so that's more than likely not possible. But if they ever come around the Cincinnati area, I'm sure we can definitely do something.
Yeah,
What
for
you
sure.
about?
Two things. One, you can always attend virtually, so that's always
Of
encouraged and
course.
appreciated. Our meetings. If you go to starvoting.org, you traverse to the events page. You can see the events, and we have them approximately once a month. Actually, our next one we're working on the date because I think it might conflict with Comfest, but we'll have one for June. If not June, we'll definitely have one for July. But it's interesting you say that because my grand vision. So much of our membership is focused in where it's whereas it's called Star Voting Ohio. Sometimes it feels like Star Voting Columbus, but I definitely don't want it to be that way. I definitely want all cities, both big and small in Ohio, to be represented. So I'm glad we have. You don't live correct? Do you live in Cincinnati proper, or just like right outside in Cincinnati, if I may ask?
I live outside Cincinnati, like 20 minutes away from it.
Mhm.
I live in like this, more specifically around the Westchester, so it's like not too far. It's more like the suburb area, but I'm pretty close to Cincy.
Gotcha. So for people who are unfamiliar, you just tell them Cincinnati, right? You don't really.
Well, I mean, if people ask me, I say usually my specific city is Liberty Township.
Mhm.
If people don't know that, I'll go like, okay, Westchester. If I have to go another level, Cincinnati.
Yeah.
I'm in there, Cincinnati
No,
right now.
I asked because I'm originally from Georgia, and we have I assume this is similar for other major cities, but what people will say for they're from Atlanta when they're not really from Atlanta, they're like Kennesaw or Stone Mountain. So that's it just reminded me of that.
I mean, that's what happens. I mean,
Mhm.
not many people are gonna know the more low key cities. Cincinnati's the
Mhm.
big name. We all know what Cincinnati is,
Of
of
course, of
course.
course.
Um, to kind of, I definitely want to dive into some things regarding Ohio and some of the updates a little bit more in depth. But just for people who are newly listening to the podcast, can you describe what star voting is and then why it's important?
Absolutely. So star voting, got my little poster behind me for those who are watching on video. Star voting stands for score then automatic runoff, and it is an alternative voting method whereby. So let me explain what we have right now. In most municipalities, in most localities, states, and municipalities across the country, we have what we call either plurality voting, first past the post, or choose one only voting. Simply put, when you go to the ballot, you can only select one candidate for any race, be it local, state, or federal election, be it executive or mayor, state legislature, president, what have you. Um, and it's fine when there's only two candidates in the race. You can either vote for one or the other. Uh, and given the political system in the U.S., it's most often a Democrat versus a Republican. But the problem comes in when there are three or more candidates, especially in competitive races. Right now, we have a situation where if you vote for a lesser known or third party or independent candidate, unfortunately, it's seen as a waste. Why'd you vote for that third party candidate when your vote could have counted towards one of the two major candidates, as or at least how it usually plays out in most elections. But with star voting, instead of being forced to select one candidate, you can vote for as many candidates as are listed, and you score them on a scale of 0 to 5. So you give your least favorite candidates, your worst candidates, 0 stars, your favorite 5 stars, everyone else in between on 1 to 4. And very importantly, if you like two candidates, or I guess dislike, if you feel the same way about two candidates, you can give them the same score, be it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0. And being able to give candidates the same score is a important component in what makes it an equitable voting system. And so back to the acronym, it's called score then automatic runoff. In the first round, all the candidates are scored by all the voters, and then the two highest candidates automatically proceed to runoff. And the purpose of the runoff is to see who was most preferred amongst all the candidates. And the automatic part is also crucial because some states or some municipalities, you have runoff elections where voters have to come back to the polls in person. I know, once again, I'm from Georgia, so I voted in primary elections in the spring, a general election in the fall, and then if we still need another election, we do the runoff in January. But star voting gets rid of runoff elections and potentially even gets rid of primary elections.
So I think for the most part, a lot of people will understand. Okay, I give my opinion on multiple candidates. It's not just a one or the other type thing. But for the layman person, the casual voter, and I always have to kind of step out of my current mindset and how I think to
Of
step into
course.
the casual individual. Why do they care? Why should the average person who is just like, oh, I'm just going to vote right now? Why is your system, your reform for voting, better compared to the current method?
Absolutely. So, star voting accomplishes so many goals, such as reducing political polarization, creating a more honest voting method system, reducing the role of money in politics. But for in layman's terms, it incentivizes. There are a lot of people who are arguably rightfully so disenchanted and frustrated with the political system. I mean, so many voters have just checked out, and a common reason that so many voters either check out, don't vote, or don't pay attention to politics is because they just don't support either major party, or or at least the candidates that most often are represented, by either party. And what people may not realize is that the voting system that we currently have like perpetuates inadequacies, and the voting system we have right now is problematic for our democracy for many reasons, such as that it just discourages people from participating because they feel a term that a lot of people are familiar with, the having to choose between the lesser of two evils. But if we had something like star voting, and now I'm always hesitant to use this analogy, with regards to sports and entertainment, but it's just one that others can understand. Just think about the enthusiasm and engagement that people have towards discussing their favorite shows, movies, books, video games, or just sports alone. I think if we moved to a system like star voting, people rather than say, "Oh, who did you vote for?" or just use this presidential election, it's like right now you're either with me or against me. Did you vote for Trump? Are you going to vote for Trump or Biden? And that's as far as the conversation goes. There's really not much more to say beyond that. But with star voting, just to use the example of the presidential election, all the presidential candidates can be taken, like, for lack of a better word, can be taken seriously. Because right now the election is between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but there are other candidates. There's candidates ran by the Green Party, there's independents, the Socialist Party, the Libertarian Party, but no one is anyone either in personal conversations or in the mainstream media taking them seriously. Probably not. I know a
Maybe only Robert F. Kennedy. Shout out Mr. Junior Kennedy Jr.
shout out to him. So that's so you have a handful of exceptions, but the pool. But I mean, every year there are countless. There are more than two in most presidential cycles. There's more than two people that run for president, but and with an occasional third or fourth exception, they're not taken seriously. So simply put, in layman's terms, star voting, whether you're a political nerd or political enthusiast, like someone such as myself, or whether you're currently on the sidelines, you don't pay attention to politics, star voting could incentivize people to vote more honestly and be engaged, and they could have not just vote honestly, but they could have honest and engaging discussions surrounding the elections, surrounding the actual policies. Let me add that. Right now, this may sound a bit simplistic or a bit reductive, but right now our elections are can arguably considered a popularity contest. Who's the most popular? Who's the most attention grabbing? Who's the most charismatic? But I think if we move to a system like star voting, it could actually be more issues based rather than focusing so much on personalities or legacy or charisma or things like those. Not that charisma is not important.
Of course, of course. Well, I'm gonna drop this question to you, Kyle. Of course,
Sure thing.
when you initially heard of star voting, I'm sure people who are listening to podcasts heard me talk about it extensively. But hear another point of view. When you initially heard about it, what did you think about star voting?
My first comparison I drew to it was with the other voting system that I'm familiar with, which was ranked choice voting. And I thought when it was explained to me the concept of rating candidates by stars and being able to vote for the same candidate sort of with the same rating, it opened my mind to it as a sort of better system. And for a person who's unfamiliar with other voting systems and only is aware of the system that we currently have, where you basically check for the single candidate that you prefer, and if that preference is because you genuinely like them more, or because you know that they are the most likely to win versus your actual preferred candidate, is it's certainly something a lot of people understand. And I think the way that star voting can be framed to help explain it to people who are unfamiliar with it, like I was a few months ago, is by explaining it in the same way that, say, Google reviews work, where you're rating your candidates in the same way you would rate a restaurant after you ate there, 0 to 5 stars. And I think that allows for a different framing of politics where people are able to have preferences for different candidates, such as Robert F. Kennedy Jr., without it taking away from other candidates that may be more likely to win. And that, I think, is a lot more healthy for our democracy. And again, reduces polarization because there's more options and not just two that might be on extremes of a certain spectrum.
Very well said. It is definitely dawns upon me. I understand human nature wants things to be very much simplified, but at the end of the day, we're definitely moving towards a unique era of social media and technology where everything needs to represent the popular or the majority opinion to an extent. Of course, the vocal minorities very loud, of course, but they don't really shake the needle as much as what we dictate as this is how I think about something. I mean, perfect example for me, right? I'm sure people have heard the TikToker Keith Lee, right? Very famous TikToker. He reviews food. His situation, even though he doesn't try to be the voice of the people, he very much so to an extent, right? Where he goes into his nuance, his details, his opinion, but it's a lot more elaborate. It's not very simple. And it seems like people, they don't know they want this until you really break it down for them. You don't want a simplified method of a way to choose a candidate that represents you and the entire country and how you're supposed to live. You want someone that truly represents your thoughts, your feelings, and everything. It's just there's usually two things. They think they want the simplified method, or two, they believe that if change were to happen, it would be against their own values. So those are always going to be problematic in terms of people not wanting change for a variety of reasons. But for that person, for potentially, that seasoned veteran, I will say, that doesn't want change, how do you convince him, her, this is going to be the way of the future in terms of voting reform and basically politics in general?
Duncan, would you like to go ahead with this one?
Yeah. So you definitely have to meet that. It's a case by case basis because some people are more easily. You have to tie it to the issues that they care about. So a successful method, I think, when it comes to persuading people or attempting to change people's minds or encourage, open people up to new ideas, is figure out what it is they care about. And I think I can't speak for every issue, but I'd say nearly every issue out there that a voter might care about, you can tie it into voting method reform. Say, okay, you care about this issue. If we issues X, Y, or Z, if we had a voting method system like star voting, one that was more honest and more equitable, it would not only encourage voters to vote with greater consideration towards your cause, your issue, but it would also encourage politicians, because right now with plurality voting, you're as a candidate, you pretty much just have to be in whatever way just better than your opponent. But with a field that's open so widely, with a field of candidates that opens so widely with star voting, you actually have to be competitive on the issues on that voters actually care about. So I would simply put forth to that voter who's most skeptical that star voting is the one reform that I believe has the greatest likelihood of advancing your cause in the electoral, at least in the electoral space.
Yeah, and if I may add onto that for a moment, there is a lot of resistance towards alternative voting systems, including star voting, coming from, I would say, the mainstream political parties. The Republican National Party and the Democratic National Party are the biggest ones standing to lose from the plurality voting that sort of reinforces and sort of almost forces a two-party system. So a lot of the people who are reluctant about that are concerned about how it may affect the current political climate. But most people, I think, would agree that the current political climate is not working, and this would change things in a direction that would put a more power into the people and less into large political parties that often don't represent the views of the majority of the population.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kyle. Oh, and another way I would describe it, without exaggeration, I view star voting as an evolution, as the next step in the long fight for civil rights and voting rights. I think I think it goes that far. If you look at the history, from every this ties in very neatly, or is very relevant to other issues such as gerrymandering, the issue of which is very big, which is a very big issue here in Ohio, as well as ballot access and election integrity. We care about all those issues, and we think star voting has its place, in the sphere of other methods of electoral reform. And I was going to say, I'm glad you mentioned, the two political parties, because there are, if just as individual voters, regular lay people might be reluctant. Unfortunately, there are certain politicians that are also reluctant. I'm only saying this because this person has gone on record, both he said so verbally, publicly, and in the legislature. But Senator Bill DeMora, State Senator Bill DeMora is not the biggest fan of alternative voting methods. I believe he sponsored a bill. He sponsored a bill in opposition to ranked choice voting. Now, when it comes to the opposition to alternative voting methods, both locally, statewide, and nationwide, unfortunately, the waters are a little muddied because there is both sincere and insincere opposition to voting method reform. And what I mean by that, so Kyle and I here, we are obviously in favor of star voting, and we decided that star voting is a more honest, superior alternative to ranked choice voting. But a lot of what I believe is happening, and the rest of the other members of Equal Vote Coalition and Star Voting could speak on this more confidently. But you have legislators that are viewing the results of ranked choice voting in different places, be it New York, Alaska, San Francisco, or elsewhere, and they see how complex it is. Now, there may be some cases where they're just dissatisfied with the results of the election, where it's like, well, my candidate lost, or the candidate I supported lost, so I definitely don't want ranked choice voting or alternative voting methods. But there are others they do see the added cost and the added complexity, and the added confusion of ranked choice voting in comparison to something like star voting, or even in comparison, because that's probably one of the most unfortunate things about ranked choice voting, which, for context, is the most well-known and most widely used voting method alternative right now, besides plurality voting, what we're most familiar with. Ranked choice voting aims to alleviate a lot of the issues that we have with our current voting system, and it is technically better than plurality voting. But just by mechanism of how it works and how votes are tabulated, it is honestly needlessly complicated, and it does open up some risk to election security in ways that something like star voting would not. So.
That's definitely a good point. And referencing ranked choice voting and the potential harm it has done. Ranked choice voting is definitely the most popular voting alternative that exists right now. And from what I'm aware of, it's been around quite a long time, actually. So it's way more seasoned than something like star voting. It's unfortunate that it tends to kind of get grouped in. It's one of the kind of lazy aspects of people in general is when they see something, they tend to group anything that is somewhat associated with it as entirely bad. It's entirely bad or it's entirely good. But I tell people all the time, nothing is ever that simple. It's way more nuanced, it's way more gray than you're expecting. And when it comes to creating solutions, of course, you're going to have hiccups in the road, but the point of these solutions is that they can continuously get molded and evolve to become better and better as humanity and society adapts. But sometimes that's a difficult notion to think about right when you're reacting towards something that like ranked choice voting, which had some hiccups down the road. I remember some of the examples, but I can't remember it exactly. But which caused maybe that state senator to dismiss it entirely, but doesn't excuse the fact that you should dismiss all voting alternatives entirely. Just that you can look at specific examples and keep that in the back of your mind and be more hesitant to another solution, which is fine. But with that said, ranked choice voting and star voting are very different. Um, when it comes to star voting, how can you be more sure that it won't have the same fate of something like a ranked choice voting?
Yeah. So one of the advantages of star voting is by nature of scoring candidates independently, uh, the tabulation is decentralized. With ranked choice voting, by nature of ranking, by nature of the comparisons and elimination rounds, all the votes must be centrally tabulated and compared before subsequent rankings can proceed. So that that leaves a lot of risk, just for just one central place for where the elections have to be conducted. Whereas with star voting, it actually operates more similarly to what we have now. Right now, you have results that are tabulated in real time. That's how we're able to get election results the night of. Say for certain few scenarios, but star voting, because you can score candidates independently, localities, counties, and municipalities can operate independently of each other. As if you have a statewide election, be it for governor or state represent or governor or senator. That's one of the reasons. And yeah, there's a couple more, but I can't remember off the top of my head. You might have to get back to me on that.
No worries. Um, so to kind of go back into what is going on now, as you
Mhm.
said, in about a few days, it will be voted upon. This podcast episode probably will be out on Monday. So the
Great.
day after, more than likely, it will be voted on. How confident are you guys in that it will get passed? And what have you done leading up to kind of putting it in place for it to get voted on anyway in Eugene and in Eugene, Oregon, so it can kind of be used in some of these elections?
Well, we won't know until it's over, but we do feel very confident. We have, especially the team in Eugene. For context, I myself have never been to Eugene or Oregon, but we, the board, and our excellent team of volunteers in Eugene and across Oregon have done tremendous work, and we've actually someone here. There's a gentleman by the name of Teron Reed, who I met here in Columbus, Ohio. He's in the agricultural community and a few other spaces, but he's been an outspoken advocate and supporter of star voting, and he actually penned a letter in favor of star voting, and that was sent to the city of Eugene. So we have supporters all across the country, but most importantly, on the ground in the city of Eugene, there's tremendous support. As you might imagine, there's been opposition from a number of places. I won't give them too much attention or too much of a platform right now, but you know, whereas yes, some of that opposition is local from Eugene, from Oregon, but there are some outside forces, trying to sway the election. Whereas the proponents of star voting are, it's it's as grassroots and as authentic as it gets. It's been about a decade in the making in Eugene, Oregon. You know, a diverse coalition of citizens and electoral reform advocates from very different walks of life that I've many of whom I've spoke to, uh, and come to witness the work that they've been doing. So I'm very optimistic, and I look forward to the results come Tuesday night or whenever the election is concluded.
All right. But, okay. So with that said, let's say it does get passed. What is the next step for start voting?
Great. The next step is to definitely keep that momentum going and try to, definitely, as I alluded to earlier, uh, much of our organization's attention has been on Eugene, rightfully so. Sorry. Before we go nationwide, so that's for the city of Eugene. They are actually in the process of collecting enough signatures statewide to put this to the ballot for the state of Oregon come this fall. I'm gonna have to come back and fact check myself, but I believe the deadline is July for signature collection statewide in Oregon, and then the next step, would be to put it to ballot to make it a reality for statewide elections, presumably for governor and state legislature in Oregon. And then after that, I'll definitely have to get to the board. But I think then we can place a greater focus on supporting other state chapters, be it in California or, especially here in Ohio.
All right, excellent. Definitely sounds like things are moving in motion. And just to remind the people, I'm sure you haven't said it, but say it now. How long have the star voting been kind of working on this?
Right. So, Star Voting Action is a 501c4 that was founded in 2019. And that was the brainchild of the Equal Vote Coalition, which was founded in 2014. The Equal Vote Coalition is a 501c nonprofit that champions uh, voting and election research, community education surrounding voting, and as well as methods of electoral reform, be it redistricting or alternative voting methods, such as and most especially star voting. So it's been about a decade in the making, since 2014 in Eugene.
All right, excellent. All right, now I want to shift gears. You mentioned that if everything kind of works out as planned, you can potentially move across states. So let's start talking about Ohio. Potentially in the future, people who are listening that I'll be focusing more on Ohio politics since I live here. But this is a good way to start it out. How did you, or what made you all decide to come to Ohio and start building star voting in this state?
So I moved to Ohio for personal reasons. So as I've alluded to several times throughout the conversation, so I was born in Kenya, but I lived most of my life in Georgia. 20 of those years in Macon, Georgia. Just personally, I was ready to I would have, in other words, I would have advocated for star voting regardless of where I moved to, but being I was closely involved with the star voting movement back in Georgia, and upon deciding to move to Ohio, I was like, Ohio is a very every state is, but Ohio is a very ripe state for political change. It has a very interesting political climate, and with the efforts that are being made locally and statewide for a number of causes and a number of arenas, I thought it'd be a great place where I could capture attention for star voting. Obviously, it's been focused here in Columbus, but I do really hope to, gain more attention in the cities of Cincinnati and Cleveland, and of course, cities all across towns and cities all over Ohio. So, but yeah, I'll let since Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were born and raised in Ohio. I guess maybe you could answer that a little bit better.
Yeah, funnily enough, I was actually born in a different country too, born in
Oh,
Germany.
that's
Um,
right.
but I moved to the US as a 3-month-old baby, so I have a lot of time here. And yes, I've lived in Central Ohio my whole life, and um, I would say that politically, it's always been a red leading state for a lot of reasons, but a few of those reasons do have to do with just lack of voter engagement, especially in the um, sort of more urban areas, there's a low voter turnout compared to rural areas, and that has skewed elections in a specific direction for my entire lifetime. And you can see from ballot initiatives that have been very successful in Ohio that when you have only two options and those options are purely weighed independently, things turn out a little bit differently than what you see at the statewide elections. And that just has to do with the number of candidates that are available and the number of candidates that are even sought after. And when you only have two choices, yes or no, you have a lot different voting system than the one with there's in principle millions of people that can be voted on and only two are really viable. So we can do away with a lot of issues that happen in Ohio politics by getting rid of sort of a two-party primary focus system and focus on a voting system that allows for more choices and more naturally occurring candidates to prop up and be elected, as opposed to the kind of standard choice of two parties.
Absolutely. And to speak more on like plans in Ohio. So right now, much just as the focus for star voting is in Eugene, right now the electoral focus in Ohio is for gerrymandering. Right now we have these citizens. I believe they are still in the process for signature gathering for the Citizens Not Politicians ballot amendment, which would remove redistricting from which would put redistricting in the hands of a nonpartisan committee. So, because right now it is gerrymandered so badly, and I think that is a large part of the reason why we have such a a Republican supermajority in both chambers, in both the state house and the state senate. So redistricting. So letting me know, both the Equal Vote Coalition and Star Voting Ohio, we are definitely in support of citizens, not politicians. Redistricting is an important reform that Ohio needs, and I hope that once that succeeds, some of that attention and focus can be placed on alternative voting methods. Of course, preferably star voting. I want to get in touch with folks, especially from organizations such as League of Women Voters, Common Cause Ohio, and Ohio Environmental Council. I think I may have hinted a few times before. In addition to electoral reform, I care very deeply about agricultural and environmental causes, and I think I mentioned earlier how you need to a big a great way to persuade people to care about star voting is to tie it to issues. And I do think star voting can be a tool to advance causes for environmental, agricultural, and ecological protections. So I've made some contacts within OEC, Ohio Environmental Council, Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association, both of which have electoral wings that I think would care very much about star voting.
All right, excellent. I think we covered a lot of things, especially in consideration the stuff that is going on now and stuff that's going on in Ohio. For me, I've only been in Ohio about a year, so I'm not like too familiar with Ohio.
Where are you from before?
Before Ohio, I was in Virginia. I moved around quite a bit. Military family. I was born in the islands. You know what I'm saying? So I'm pretty comfortable moving around. But I probably plan to stay in Ohio for a while. I have some friends here, so we like to hang out. But I could tell from the people I have encountered and from what I have seen that Ohio is definitely a more red state, of course. And we'll see how everything kind of turns out. And voter turnout, voter participation is going to be huge in turning things. And I've met some good people, so we'll see how everything kind of works out overall. But with that said, we'll start wrapping things up. Moving forward, how do people get involved with what you got going on here in Ohio? Where do they go and what do they do?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So you can give us a follow at Star Voting Ohio on both Instagram and Twitter. You can go to the website. We finally created a landing page just for Ohio. Go to starvoting.org/Ohio. If you'd like to sign up to our email news alerts or even potentially sign up to volunteer, go to starvoting.org/ /join, and you can be onboarded onto both Star Voting Action and Star Voting Ohio. Yeah, just put in your email address at least for email newsletter updates, and we could provide further information so we can get in contact with you. Let us know who you are, and if you found this podcast episode inspiring or engaging, or if you read more about Star Voting and you live anywhere in Ohio and think that this is for you, please give us a follow. And you can also contact our chapter at ohio@equal.vote. You can email me directly, Duncan @equal.vote, and you can email Kyle. Can you give them your email?
Yeah, Kyle at equal.vote. And one last thing I'll add on is that about a month from now, as we mentioned, we'll be having a booth at ComFest, which is June 28th. So if you're interested in talking to anybody in the community, or you happen to live in the Central Ohio area and are interested in going to ComFest, which is at Goodale Park in Columbus, Ohio, then come look for the booth for Star Voting. You can chat with some people about it. We'd love to meet more people who are interested as well as us.
All right, excellent. Well, I appreciate you both coming on, of course. This should come on relatively soon. Everybody, make sure you guys follow all those information. All their stuff should be either on my website or in the description of the podcast episode. So appreciate y'all. As always, make sure you guys, get out there, participate in your local politics. That's something important that people just don't do enough. With that said, hope you guys enjoyed. Y'all have a good one. Take care and peace.